You know that moment when you check your bank account after payday, and instead of feeling relief, you feel this weird knot in your stomach? Like you just got paid more money than your parents ever made in a month. But somehow, you're still calculating whether you can afford to order takeout, or if you need to eat whatever's dying in the back of your refrigerator. There's something deeply wrong happening here. And I'm not talking about your budgeting skills or your lack of discipline. I'm talking about a psychological trap that's so invisible, so normalized, that most people don't even realize they're caught in it until they're 40 years old, making 6 figures and still living paycheck to paycheck. Let me tell you about the salary illusion. It's the reason why making $7,000 a month can feel exactly the same as making $3,000 a month. It's why people who get promoted and double their income somehow end up with less money in their savings account than they had before. And it's probably the single biggest obstacle standing between you and actual financial freedom. Here's what nobody tells you when you're starting your career. Every financial guru, every motivational speaker, every business book tells you the same story. Work hard, get promoted, make more money, and then, magically, your problems will disappear. But that's not what happens. What actually happens is something far more insidious. When you make $3,000 a month, you have a very clear picture of your financial constraints. You know exactly what you can't afford. You can't afford a nice apartment, so you live with roommates. You can't afford a new car, so you drive something that makes concerning noises. You can't afford to eat out regularly, so you cook at home. Your life has boundaries, and those boundaries are visible. But then something changes. You get that promotion. You get that new job. Suddenly you're making $7,000 a month, maybe even $10,000. And here's where the trap springs shut. Because now you can afford things, not everything, but more things. You can afford to move into your own place. You can afford to lease a decent car. You can afford to order lunch instead of packing it. You can afford to subscribe to services that make your life easier, and each of these decisions, individually, seems totally reasonable. You're not buying a yacht. You're not living beyond your means. You're just living at your means. But here's the thing about lifestyle inflation. It doesn't feel like inflation when it's happening. It feels like finally living a normal life. It feels like you've earned the right to stop struggling. When you upgrade from a shared apartment to a one-bedroom, you're not being extravagant. You're just getting some privacy, some dignity. When you lease a reliable car instead of driving a beater that might strand you on the highway, you're not being frivolous. You're being responsible. And this is where the math gets really interesting, because let's run the actual numbers. When you were making $3,000 a month, let's say you managed to save $300. That's 10%. Not great, but something. You had minimal fixed expenses because you had to. Rent with roommates, maybe $800. Cheap car insurance, basic phone plan. You were operating in survival mode, and survival mode is actually pretty efficient. But now you're making $7,000. You've more than doubled your income, so logically you should be saving way more than $300 a month, right? Maybe $1,000, maybe $1,500. But when you actually look at your bank account, you're somehow saving less, maybe nothing at all. How does this happen? Let's break it down. Your apartment is now $2,000 instead of $800. That's an extra $14,400 per year. Your car payment, because now you're leasing something decent, is $400 a month. That's $4,800 annually. Your car insurance went up because you're insuring a nicer car. Your food costs doubled because you're no longer forcing yourself to meal prep every Sunday. You started paying for a gym membership because you can finally afford to take care of your health. You got subscriptions to services that make sense when you're busy. None of these things are stupid. None of them are irresponsible. But when you add them all up, you've increased your monthly expenses by exactly the amount your income increased. You're running faster, but you're staying in the same place. You're making $7,000 a month and somehow feeling the exact same financial pressure you felt at $3,000. And here's the truly cruel part. The psychological impact is worse, because now when you're stressed about money, you feel like a failure. When you were making $3,000, being broke made sense. Everyone understood. But when you're making $7,000 and you still can't afford to take a vacation, people look at you like you're financially incompetent. This is what I call the hamster wheel effect. And it's not just happening at $7,000 a month. I've seen people making $20,000 a month experiencing the exact same phenomenon. They upgraded from the one-bedroom to a house. They upgraded from the leased car to a luxury SUV. They upgraded from basic health insurance to premium plans. They hired a cleaning service because they don't have time. They started private schooling for their kids because they can afford better opportunities. Every decision makes sense in isolation, but the cumulative effect is that they're still living paycheck to paycheck. They just have nicer stuff while they do it. Now here's where most financial advice goes wrong. The standard response is to tell you to budget better, track your expenses, cut out the lattes, stop being so irresponsible with your money. But that advice completely misses the psychological reality of what's happening here. You're not being irresponsible. You're responding rationally to a change in your reference point. When you make $3,000, your reference point is other people making $3,000. You compare yourself to them. You live like them. When you make $7,000, your reference point shifts. Now you're comparing yourself to people making $7,000, your coworkers who make the same salary, your friends who got similar promotions, and you adjust your lifestyle to match. This is called reference group theory, and it's one of the most powerful forces in consumer behavior. We don't make spending decisions in a vacuum. We make them based on what seems normal within our social context, and as your income rises, your social context changes. You're no longer spending time with people who live with roommates and drive beaters. You're spending time with people who have their own places and reliable cars, and their spending patterns become your spending patterns. The really insidious part is that this process happens gradually enough that you don't notice it. You don't wake up one day and decide to blow all your extra income. It happens one decision at a time, spread across months or years. The slightly nicer apartment, then the better neighborhood, then the car upgrade, then the wardrobe refresh, because now you're working in a professional environment, then the furniture upgrade, because you're hosting people now. Each step seems logical. Each step seems like you've earned it. But at the end of this process, you look at your bank account and realize you're in exactly the same position you were before the promotion. Except now, you have more expensive problems. Your car requires premium gas. Your apartment has higher utilities. Your new social circle expects you to participate in activities that cost money: dinners out, weekend trips, weddings in expensive destinations. And here's where it gets psychological, because now you can't go backward. You can't move back in with roommates. That would feel like failure. You can't downgrade your car. People would notice. You can't stop participating in social activities. You'd lose your connections. You've created a lifestyle that requires your current income just to maintain. You're not building wealth. You're building a more expensive version of paycheck to paycheck existence. This is what I call the golden handcuffs. You've locked yourself into a lifestyle that requires you to keep earning at your current level just to avoid going backward. You can't take risks. You can't leave a job you hate. You can't pursue opportunities that might temporarily reduce your income, because you've built a life that requires constant feeding. Let me give you a specific example. I know someone who got a job offer at a startup. Exciting company, great growth potential. But the base salary was 20% less than his current corporate job. In exchange, he'd get equity that could potentially be worth millions if the company succeeded. Should have been an easy decision, right? Chase the upside. But he couldn't take it, because he'd bought a house with a mortgage based on his current salary. He had a car payment. Taking a pay cut would have meant downsizing everything. So he stayed in the corporate job he hated, safe, stable, trapped. This is the real cost of lifestyle inflation. It's not just that you're not saving money, it's that you're sacrificing optionality. You're trading freedom for comfort. And the cruel irony is that the comfort isn't even making you happier. Research in behavioral economics has shown something fascinating. Once people reach a certain income threshold, about $75,000 annually in the U.S., additional income stops correlating with increased happiness. You know what does correlate with happiness? Financial security, having savings, having options, having the ability to say no to things you don't want to do. But most people making $7,000 a month don't have financial security. They have a nicer prison. They've upgraded from a cell to a suite, but they're still locked in. So what's the solution? How do you escape this trap? First, you need to understand that this is not a willpower problem. This is a systems problem. You can't just decide to spend less and expect it to work. Your brain is wired to adjust to your reference group. You need to hack the system. Here's what actually works. When you get a raise or a promotion, immediately automate the extra money away before your brain has time to adjust. If you're making $3,000 and you jump to $7,000, set up an automatic transfer of $3,000 per month into a separate account that you don't look at. Live on the remaining $4,000. Your lifestyle will inflate to match $4,000, which is still better than $3,000, but you'll be saving 42% of your income instead of 0. This works because it exploits the same psychological mechanism that creates the problem. Your brain adjusts to what's available. If $4,000 is what hits your checking account, your brain will normalize around $4,000. You'll still upgrade your life. You'll still feel like you're making progress, but you won't inflate your lifestyle to consume your entire income. Second, be extremely intentional about your reference group. This sounds harsh, but if all your friends are spending money in ways that don't align with your financial goals, you need different friends. Not because there's anything wrong with them, but because your brain will automatically adjust to match their behavior. If everyone around you is leasing luxury cars and taking expensive vacations, you'll feel pressure to do the same. If you surround yourself with people who prioritize financial independence over status signaling, that becomes your normal. Third, run the numbers on every major spending decision. Not just can you afford it, but what's the opportunity cost? That $400 car payment isn't just $400. Over 5 years, it's $24,000. If you invested that money instead, at a conservative 8% return, it would grow to over $36,000. That's not just a car payment. That's a year of freedom. That's the ability to take a sabbatical. That's options. And here's the thing. I'm not saying you should never spend money. I'm not advocating for extreme frugality or living in poverty while you save every penny. I'm saying you need to be conscious about the trade-offs. Every dollar you spend on lifestyle is a dollar you're not spending on freedom. And for most people, freedom is worth more than a slightly nicer car. The people who escape the salary illusion are the ones who realize that income is not the same as wealth. Wealth is the gap between what you make and what you spend. You can make $7,000 a month and be poor if you spend $7,000 a month. You can make $4,000 a month and be building wealth if you only spend $3,000. This is why you see people making $200,000 a year who are stressed about money, while others making $60,000 are calm and secure. It's not about the income number. It's about the gap. It's about the buffer. It's about the options you're creating for yourself. And here's the final piece that nobody talks about. There's a number, a specific amount of savings where everything changes, where the anxiety disappears, where you stop living in scarcity mode and start operating from a position of strength. For most people, that number is somewhere around 6 months of living expenses in liquid savings. When you have that cushion, you stop making decisions out of fear. You can negotiate your salary because you're not desperate. You can leave a toxic job because you have runway. You can take calculated risks because failure won't destroy you. That psychological shift is worth more than any raise. But you'll never get there if every time your income goes up, your expenses follow. You'll just keep running faster on the same hamster wheel, wondering why you're exhausted despite making good money. The salary illusion is the idea that more income automatically equals a better life. The reality is that more income equals more choices. And most people choose to spend everything they make on a slightly more expensive version of the same life they had before. They choose comfort over freedom. They choose status over security, and then they wonder why they feel trapped despite making good money. Don't be that person. Break the pattern. When your income goes up, let your savings go up proportionally. Let your freedom go up. Keep your lifestyle inflation minimal and intentional, because the goal isn't to make more money. The goal is to need less money. The goal is optionality. The goal is waking up and realizing that you're not living paycheck to paycheck anymore. You're living by choice, and that feeling is worth more than any salary.